9 years ago, my life was destroyed when my own parents accused me of abusing my little sister. They cut me off, branded me a monster, and let me suffer alone. But when I was finally invited back to the family dinner, one slip of the tongue exposed the truth, and everything they'd hidden for nearly a decade came crashing down. My 15-year-old cousin fabricated a baseless accusation to escape punishment. 9 years later, she finally confessed. A decade ago, my entire family severed ties with me after my cousin alleged sexual assault when she was a child. I was 22, engrossed in a game with friends, when my mother violated our family's unspoken rule. When her initial call went unanswered, she dialed again. In our family, a second call signaled an absolute emergency. Upon answering, I discerned pandemonium and shouts before she retreated to another room. Weeping, she inquired if I had any admissions regarding Eve. I denied it. Eve was my younger cousin, whom I hadn't seen in years. That's when my mother shrieked that Eve, at 9 years old, claimed I, at 16, had repeatedly abused her in my room while she was playing. She provided exhaustive accounts of the alleged incidents. My breath caught. I insisted on my innocence, but my mother's shouts of "Did you commit this act?" echoed relentlessly. My denials were met with her unwavering disbelief. The conversation concluded with both parents, their voices amplified on speakerphone, disowning me forever. My sisters sent messages labeling me abhorrent, then severed communication. Attempts to reach any family member were met with instant blocking. My father delivered a final text, instructing me to cease all contact. The subsequent year shattered my existence. I anticipated apprehension by the authorities daily. I stopped eating and struggled in employment prospects. I commenced excessive alcohol consumption and oxycodone abuse. I grew aggressive, but living alone, I merely vandalized my living space. When neighbors summoned law enforcement regarding smashed glassware, I convinced them it was accidental. I spent nights contriving ways to harm Eve and make it appear unforeseen. Sometimes I entertained thoughts of actually carrying out what she had charged me with. But worse, the most sinister imaginings engulfed me. I finally secured a position in late 2015, which provided much-needed routine. Slowly, I achieved abstinence and acquired a house last year. Mood stabilizers replaced dark thoughts with indifferent sensations. I attempted relationships twice, but explaining my familial estrangement made women withdraw. My counselor is the sole woman I truly converse with. Last week, my mother sent a message unexpectedly. It was our first communication in 9 years. She expressed missing me and informed me regarding my sisters having children. Then yesterday, another text disclosed the shocking news. At a family gathering last month, Eve was minimizing what had occurred to her after it was mentioned. My mother grew wary and questioned her intensely about it, and Eve finally admitted nothing ever transpired, suggesting she probably imagined it. The family reacted vehemently. My mother and father retreated to the backyard and simply wept. My parents expressed their horror and rage toward her. They disseminated the reality to everyone and desired my return to their lives. I haven't replied to them, however. Old recollections are resurfacing, and I'm trembling with fury. A part of me wishes to methodically dismantle each of their lives, beginning with Eve, to make them feel a semblance of what I endured. Then this morning, Eve messaged me personally. 9 years of quietude, and she texts as if nothing happened. She stated she's aware of my animosity, but needs to convey the unvarnished reality. It wasn't an imagination or misapprehension. When she was 15, her mother discovered her clandestine departure to rendezvous with her partner. She was going to be confined for the entire summer and forego camp. So, she informed them she was exhibiting disruptive conduct due to previous distress. When they pressed for specifics, she fabricated the narrative about me. She selected me because I was distant at university and rarely present. She assumed I would refute it, and everyone would proceed without further thought. She never anticipated them to cut me off completely. She attempted to retract it a few days later, but they claimed she was merely shielding me. The deception escalated uncontrollably, and she was too terrified to confess. She's been in counseling for years, grappling with remorse. She concluded with, "I am so sorry, and I know you will never pardon me, but I wanted you to know it was unrelated to my person." I captured all the messages and am now contemplating their deployment. My therapist is on a leave of absence for 3 weeks. The rage is engulfing me. I've been abstinent for 4 years, but all I desire is to get utterly intoxicated and confront them at their residences. I fully understand my course of action. It's time for them to comprehend repercussions. I occupied my kitchen at 3 a.m., computer screen illuminated with Eve's communications visible. My hands quivered as I reread her admission. 9 years. 9 expletive years of my existence ruined because she didn't want to skip summer recreation. The overhead illumination wavered, projecting silhouettes that matched the internal turmoil brewing inside me. Across town, Eve remained sleepless in her bed, device held tightly in her hand. She monitored it compulsively, startled by each alert. Her betrothal band gleamed in the moonlight as she updated our conversation log for the 100th occasion. Still no response from me. She gnawed her lip and composed a new text, then erased it, then typed again. I compelled myself to shut the computer and rise. My actions became automatic, preparing an unconsumed beverage. The fury needed an outlet. I seized my vehicle keys. At 6 a.m., I pulled up near Eve's residential building. The morning was chilly and damp from nocturnal precipitation. I remained in my automobile, motor disengaged, simply biding time. I was familiar with her habits from online surveillance over the years. She consistently ran at 6:15, precisely as anticipated. Eve emerged from the building in her athletic attire. She limbered up by the doorway, headphones inserted, utterly oblivious. Then she faced the vehicular area, and our gazes intersected. She halted in the middle of her exercise. Her athletic footwear squealed on the wet surface as she retreated deliberately. I remained motionless, unblinking, simply gazed at her through the windscreen. Her countenance paled. She tripped rearward, almost falling on the edge, then turned and scurried back indoors. My device vibrated at once. Eve's moniker illuminated the display with a message. Kindly utter a word, any word. I disregarded it and launched the professional networking site on my device. Her account indicated she worked at a regional advertising company, a high-ranking client executive. The paradox was evident to me. She established a profession on constructing narratives while I forfeited all due to her deceptions. Her betrothal news from last month gazed back at me. Tom Williams, financial advisor, an impeccably groomed individual with a flawless grin. A subsequent message from Eve. I know you are perusing these. I can see the viewed confirmations. My device chimed. Marcus. I had entirely overlooked our customary morning gathering. It was the first time I'd failed to attend in 2 years. I allowed it to divert to messaging service. I captured an image of Eve's admission from the previous evening and her professional networking page. Then I accessed my message history with my parent. Her pleas for my return sat there unaddressed. My digit paused above the file upload icon. A single image, devoid of explanation. Allow her to deduce it. My device power indicated 6%. The power depletion alert imparted haste to my resolution. I pressed transmit. The reaction was instant. Mother called. I rejected the call. She repeatedly dialed. By the time I began commuting to my workplace, she had called 47 times within 10 minutes. My device vibrated incessantly on the companion's position, the screen illuminating with mom. Over and over. I pulled into the factory's designated area, and my stomach dropped. Eve's white Honda was in the guest parking. What in the world was she doing at my workplace? From within, I observed her through the office pane, conversing vivaciously with my supervisor. She delicately wiped her eyes with a facial wipe. My supervisor, Bill, wore an expression of solicitude, the demeanor adopted during bereavement. I commenced work and tried to bypass the office, but Bill spotted me and gestured for my entry. Eve avoided eye contact. Bill drew me away by the hydration station. His tone was hushed and compassionate. My condolences on your family's loss. Eve provided a full account. Avail yourself of necessary time off. I maintained a composed and steady tone. No one passed away. She is being dishonest. The surveillance camera's indicator light pulsed overhead, documenting all events. Bill's expression shifted from compassionate to bewildered. He looked back and forth between us. Eve at last met my gaze, eyes wide with entreaty. My sole concern was for your well-being. You were unresponsive to all calls. I departed wordlessly and proceeded to my workstation. Bill pursued me, visibly perturbed, but I just began my work shift stock-taking as if nothing had occurred. Eve departed swiftly thereafter. During my initial respite, my device was deluged with social media alerts. Eve had contacted my colleagues, asserting concern for my psychological state. She requested them to ascertain my welfare. Stated I had exhibited unusual behavior, and the relatives were anxious. Jake from logistics neared me at the dispatch area. Friend, your relative visited. She appeared genuinely worried about your condition. A truly solicitous family member. Are you all right? My jaw tightened with such force, I feared my teeth would shatter, but I simply assented and continued my tasks. During the midday meal, I occupied my vehicle and accessed the social media platform. I had not viewed Eve's online presence in months. Her entries from 2015 remained accessible. And there it lay, her survivor declaration immediately following the charge. Innumerable affirming remarks, individuals commending her courage, extending supplications. A particular message from 3 weeks prior drew my attention. Tom Williams expressing admiration for her resilience. My device vibrated. An unidentified caller. I nearly overlooked it, then glimpsed the initial text. This is Tom Williams. The truth is now clear to me. We must converse. Prior to my full comprehension, a subsequent message arrived. Father, your mother is now in hysterics. Eve claims you have been pursuing her for months. We are contemplating a protective injunction. I desired to hurl my device through the windscreen. Instead, I accessed our former family communication group from prior to everything deteriorating. I reviewed years of history. Eve's request for assistance with her algebra assignments appeared, referring to me as her preferred relative during my university visits, her final communication preceding the accusation, requesting a memento from my university. My device chimed. Personnel Administration Division. I allowed it to divert to the message service and promptly accessed the message. This is Janet from Personnel. We have received a troubling electronic mail regarding you from a relative. A compulsory meeting for tomorrow morning is required to address certain claims concerning your demeanor and past conduct. Kindly return my call to confirm. I re-entered the premises and my team leader, Mike, discreetly approached me. Just a warning. The individual who visited previously dispatched rather serious emails to Human Resources. Her narrative appeared highly persuasive. Alluded to aggression targeting women. Simply wished to inform you of the situation awaiting you tomorrow. Following work, I journeyed to my parents' residential area, not directly to their residence. I was not prepared for such an encounter. Instead, I went to Mrs. Chen's adjacent dwelling. She had consistently shown me kindness, even dispatched a note expressing disbelief in the allegations. Mrs. Chen welcomed me inside for a beverage. Her hands trembled during the pouring. I could not ascertain if it was due to advanced age or apprehension. Your parents informed everyone you were receiving assistance for your issue, she stated softly. However, I never believed you had a problem initially. That night, I established a temporary email address using the library's computer. I appended the image captures of Eve's admission and dispatched them to Tom Williams' professional email address, which I located on his corporate webpage. Then, I promptly erased the account. By 11 p.m., I felt compelled. I passed by Eve's residential building. Tom's luxury vehicle was in the guest parking. Even from the road, I could discern yelling from her upper-level apartment. A casement was forcefully closed. My device illuminated with a message from Eve. I am informing everyone you manipulated those images. I remained in my vehicle contemplating that when vehicle lights appeared behind me. I stiffened, anticipating conflict, but it was Amy, my sibling Amy. She exited her automobile, and even under the lamplight, her eyeliner was smudged. She rapped on my window. I lowered it, but remained silent. Mother displayed the image capture, Amy stated, her voice quivering. I've been reflecting on the occasion Eve falsely accused me of pilfering her tablet. Do you recall? She was utterly persuasive. She even provided specifics on the timing and method. Yet, we discovered it beneath her bed a week subsequent. She peered at my front passenger side and observed my prepared athletic bag by the entrance. Did you intend to depart? I gestured negatively. Merely prefer readiness. Amy entered the front passenger seat uninvited. She frequently engaged in such behavior during adolescence. Feigned ailments prior to examinations, fabricated wounds before familial gatherings she wished to avoid. Do you recall her claim of appendicitis just before Grandpa's 80th birthday? The medical facility found no ailment. My device vibrated. Tom Williams, once more. She confessed it to me. I am finished. She is unaware of my communication with you. I presented the message to Amy. She seized my device and replied before I could intervene. Are you able to document her if she reiterates the admission? Tom's reply was instantaneous. Already contemplating the identical action. She has been sending erratic, escalating messages throughout the night. She has alluded to possessing evidence of your harassment. I know it's deceitful. Amy returned my device. The situation will worsen before it improves. The subsequent morning, Eve shared on the social media platform a dark square with light script about toxic family members attempting to alter the past. The accompanying labels sicken me. #survivor, #mytruth, #healingjourney. Within 60 minutes, 3 relatives had messaged me, inquiring if the online entry pertained to me. One relative noted Eve's recent peculiar behavior at familial gatherings. I was entering my workplace when I received a further message from Tom. I will rendezvous with you at the eatery on 5th Street at midday. I possess information vital for you to comprehend. I reached the establishment ahead of schedule and occupied a private seating area in the rear. My hands cradled a coffee mug I had no intention of consuming. The server, Catherine, acknowledged my presence from my frequent patronage and offered a compassionate gesture. She'd observed me here on numerous mornings following difficult evenings. Tom Williams entered precisely at 12 o'clock. He appeared fatigued, his typically impeccable professional presentation unkempt, under-eye shadows indicated his sleeplessness. He moved into the seating opposite me and retrieved his device. He displayed an audio capture application with numerous entries originating from the preceding 2 evenings. He clarified that upon receiving my electronic mail, he had challenged Eve. She had collapsed emotionally, confessed everything, then instantly attempted to contrive fresh accounts of the narrative. He had documented the entirety. He presented an audio file where Eve rehearsed various justifications. In one rendition, she asserted I had been recently bothering her. In another, she declared I had menaced her relatives. Every repetition grew more intricate, more detrimental. The deception was systematic, pre-planned. Tom presented me with a dossier containing printed electronic mails exchanged between Eve and her closest confidant, Chloe. They deliberated backup strategies, should the truth surface. Eve had authored elaborate blueprints for preserving her identity as a wronged party, encompassing assertions of recent harassment and intimidation. Prior to my ability to reply, the restaurant entrance bell rang. Eve entered, frantically surveying the premises. Catherine instantly obstructed her passage and vociferously proclaimed she did not serve dishonest individuals. Eve's countenance reddened as other customers gawked. She noticed us and attempted to come closer, but Catherine bodily prevented her. Eve departed swiftly, but not before casting a glance of unadulterated animosity my way. My device vibrated with a message from my sibling, Bella. Amy had escorted her to my residence that morning. She wished to converse. I rendezvoused with them at my home after departing the eatery. Bella was weeping even before entering. She extracted a diary from 2015 and presented it to me with trembling hands. She had recorded Eve's conduct trends throughout their adolescence, deceiving instructors, feigning anxiety episodes, influencing relatives for notice. Page after page revealed an unambiguous course of falsehood. Bella conceded she had suspected Eve's dishonesty regarding me, but was too intimidated to voice her concerns. The family's response had been profoundly harsh, so abrupt. She had persuaded herself of her error. Later that afternoon, I received a social media message from Rachel, Eve's university housemate. She had observed Eve's online entry and identified the deceptive methods. She possessed her own evidence, image captures of Eve boasting about ruining an adversary. The communications originated from our second year of higher education. Eve had composed elaborate schemes detailing how she would devastate someone's existence if they ever disregarded her. A single message sent chills down my spine. My relative learned not to disregard me. I replied judiciously to Rachel, preserving a businesslike demeanor despite my fury. She proposed to transmit all her holdings. Within 60 minutes, I possessed conversation records illustrating Eve's past of unfounded charges, encompassing one against an educator who had assigned her a poor mark. Concurrently, I had to address the personnel complaint. I composed a temperate reply, including a legal associate who had extended assistance. I clarified the circumstances objectively, incorporated the proof of Eve's admission, and upheld absolute decorum. My colleagues observed my tranquil bearing and began posing inquiries. Information disseminated rapidly throughout the facility about the true events unfolding. Eve's despair was intensifying. Tom notified me she had been put on enforced absence from her advertising company after he had divulged details about her pattern of unsubstantiated claims. Their nuptials, planned for 3 weeks hence, were unequivocally rescinded. She was rapidly deteriorating. Later that night, while at the supermarket, I sensed surveillance. I pivoted to observe my mother at the aisle's termination. Her hands trembled as she drew near. She softly offered an apology, tears flowing down her countenance. She was adorned with the necklace I had gifted her for her 50th birthday. Prior to further conversation, Eve emerged from the adjacent passageway. She had been shadowing my mother. Eve promptly began speaking loudly about my alleged manipulation of all present, how I falsified proof. Other customers commenced gazing. I remained quiet, recalling the overhead surveillance devices. My mother's gaze darted between us, her expression collapsing as Eve's pretense faded. Eve then executed an unforeseen maneuver. She proposed $50,000 from her financial endowment to depart the locale and establish a new life elsewhere. She articulated it audibly for others to perceive, presenting it as liberal recompense for a misapprehension. I retrieved my device and commenced recording, ensuring she reiterated the proposition. She complied, adding that my sole requirement was to affix my signature to a declaration asserting the images were falsified. That evening, a message arrived from Aunt Linda, Eve's maternal parent. She desired to speak. Something felt inconsistent with Eve's continually shifting narrative. We consented to convene at an impartial venue the following day. Tom remained a crucial confederate. He disclosed that Eve had been undergoing counseling since university for pathological mendacity and cunning. During an earlier episode concerning baseless charges against an academic aide, her therapeutic records had been legally compelled. He possessed duplicates. The tendency was indisputable. I understood that within the broader family, only my parents and Eve's parents fully credited her account. All others were beginning to doubt the story. The familial group conversation, dormant for years, suddenly invigorated with discourse. Rachel forwarded additional proof. Conversation records from a week prior revealed Eve formulating her alternative strategy. Should her deceit be exposed, she intended to assert psychological infirmity. She investigated indications, rehearsed narratives concerning detachment, and erroneous recollections. The premeditation was disquieting. Marcus demonstrated genuine friendship when Eve reappeared at my place of employment. She had lingered until she observed me proceeding to the dispatch area. Marcus bodily positioned himself as a barrier, preventing her entry. He summoned security personnel, while holding his ground. He informed her he recognized an aggressor upon sight, and it was not me. She departed before security personnel appeared, but not before several colleagues observed her aggressive conduct. Later that night, Marcus recounted his personal experience. He had been unjustly charged by a relative years prior. He recognized the recurring behaviors, the deceptive stratagems. We dedicated hours to devising a secure plan to unveil Eve's deception without jeopardizing genuine victims or framing this as retribution. Tom proposed publishing all information digitally, but I declined. This was not concerned with public shame. It was about veracity and safeguarding others from her cunning. We consented to manage all matters discreetly, recording every exchange for self-preservation, but not exploiting digital platforms. 2 days hence, Eve accosted me at a fuel station. I was refueling when she materialized next to my vehicle. She inclined intimately and asserted that no one would credit that screen captures could not be falsified. It was my trustworthiness against her own, and she was perceived as the aggrieved party by all. I uttered nothing, merely offered a faint smile, and gestured toward the surveillance camera positioned directly above. Her countenance blanched. Tom collated his audio files and drafted a notarized declaration. He duplicated all information in 3 separate places and provided me with duplicates. Eve's admission was now exhaustively corroborated by various origins. The repercussions unfolded more rapidly. Eve's closest companion, Chloe, severed all digital ties with her after Tom shared the veracity to her. She dispatched an apology to me, stating she had consistently sensed something amiss but had opted to credit her acquaintance. Additional relatives began establishing contact, articulating their long-held misgivings and insights. Amy initiated a group conversation with relatives who supported my account. She distributed Bella's diary records. The broader familial online discussion group erupted with debates. Factions emerged, yet the inclination moved towards authenticity. Eve's proponents fell silent sequentially as proof accumulated. I arranged an urgent consultation with my counselor's associate. She helped me formulate replies that would safeguard my abstinence while pursuing equity. We developed tactics for managing encounters without yielding to wrath. The endeavor was draining, yet essential. The climax arrived when Eve appeared at my residence at 2 a.m., intoxicated and pounding on my entrance. She shrieked that I had sabotaged all, that I had obliterated her existence. I contacted Marcus and Tom at once. They appeared within moments to observe and record her conduct. Eve's unpredictable actions intensified. She assailed my door, hurled a stone at my window, and bellowed menaces. My aged neighbor emerged and informed her this was not the initial instance of Eve's such behavior. Multiple other residents observed from their pains. Marcus documented all events while Tom summoned law enforcement. Upon the officer's arrival, Eve attempted to allege I had invited her over then denied her entry. But with numerous observers and her evident inebriation, her account disintegrated. The officers procured testimonies from all individuals and recommended I pursue a protective injunction. The following morning, Eve's employer telephoned Tom to apprise him that, following an internal inquiry, they had assigned her indefinite leave. Her pattern of unfounded claims and the present circumstances rendered her a risk. News had disseminated throughout their professional connections. Mrs. Chin disclosed an unforeseen detail. She had overheard Eve's parents in 2019 deliberating plans to inquire about my well-being, to ascertain if I had reformed. Video evidence from their doorbell camera showed them in a vehicle outside my residence, observing. They had been aware of my location for years, yet opted to uphold the estrangement. I made sure Tom received backing from his social circle, upholding limits against vindicatively pursuing Eve. I proposed he join a self-help group for partners of deceptive individuals. He accepted my suggestion and found it beneficial. Both my siblings completely mended relations with me. We commenced weekly evening meals, recounting 9 years of forfeited recollections. They presented their offspring to me, my nieces and nephews previously unknown to me. The anguish of squandered years was immense, but the happiness of re-establishing contact helped mitigate it. Relatives who had initially credited my account began making contact with apologies for their silence. They, too, had feared ostracism. The familial interaction had been governed by apprehension of being cut off, and Eve had expertly exploited that vulnerability. Eve attempted a final act of deception. She dispatched a group message alleging I was alienating everyone from her, that she was the true aggrieved party, psychologically manipulated by a cunning deceiver. But her continually shifting narrative eroded her trustworthiness. Family members started highlighting the discrepancies. During a familial meal to which Eve was not invited, she appeared regardless. When challenged about her falsehoods, her pretense finally vanished entirely. She shrieked that I merited it for disregarding her, for being universally preferred, for possessing the life she desired. The confession was observed by 12 relatives. My father perceived Eve's genuine character when she menaced to ruin me as she had previously. His countenance blanched as comprehension emerged. The individual who had dispatched that concluding message 9 years prior now perceived the reality. He utterly collapsed emotionally. Previous familial acquaintances who had withdrawn began extending invitations to social events. Eve was no longer received once her conduct became public. The emotional detachment she had imposed on me was now her experience. The human resources inquiry at my workplace determined Eve's assertions were unproven and seemed vindictive. Her grievance was formally rejected. My supervisor expressed regret for initially crediting her, stating she had been highly persuasive. I did not fault him. She had deceived an entire family for 9 years. A familial gathering was planned for the subsequent month. Grandmother, now 94 and in deteriorating health, desired all present for potentially her final assembly. This became a temporal target of sorts. The relatives had to determine how to manage Eve's attendance. Further proof emerged when Eve's former university partner made contact. She had wrongly charged him with larceny when he had ended their relationship. He possessed a police record substantiating his blamelessness. The history of unfounded charges extended further back than anyone had apprehended. I assembled a chronological record of Eve's deceptions with dates, attestations, and corroboration. The trend revealed distinct intensification over time. What began as minor falsehoods for notice had evolved into existence-shattering baseless charges. The family could not disregard the proof. At a familial assembly, I presented all calmly, while Eve grew progressively distressed. She recanted her statements repeatedly, altered her narrative, and ultimately began yelling at all present. Her parents attempted to pacify her, but she turned on them as well. Mother at last conceded she had sensed something amiss, but was too stunned to reason lucidly. The specificity and passion in Eve's original charge had superseded her rationale. She had opted to credit her niece over her son, and the remorse was devastating her. A modest familial assembly took place without Eve. It was the initial occasion in 9 years I had been invited back. I occupied my former place at the dining table. All were cautious not to allude to the vanished years, but the vacant void where those recollections ought to have resided was discernible. Eve executed one final desperate maneuver. She asserted she was experiencing anxiety attacks and cardiac flutter from the strain. She needed familial support or dire consequences might ensue, but the family identified the recurring behavior. Amy noted that Eve had employed identical medical stratagems in secondary school to evade repercussions. Then arrived another detriment to Eve's trustworthiness. Her employer ascertained she had misrepresented her qualifications on her application, claiming a master's degree she had not obtained. The inquiry into her history had uncovered numerous fabrications. She was officially dismissed. My connections with my siblings were entirely mended. We had shared meals, exchanged narratives, endeavored to bridge 9 years of voids. The anguish of squandered years would never entirely abate, but we were constructing something novel. Through all of this, I preserved my abstinence. Marcus monitored my well-being daily. My counselor's associate offered vital assistance. The impulse to consume alcohol was present, particularly during the most arduous encounters. But I possessed resources now that I had lacked 9 years prior. Eve's existence was disintegrating, but it was solely a result of her own actions. Every falsehood she had uttered to conceal prior deceptions had constructed a precarious structure. Now it was all collapsing. The family she had influenced for almost 10 years was at last perceiving the reality. I occupied my vehicle outside my boyhood residence one evening, attempting to determine whether to enter. The dwelling appeared identical, yet all had transformed. 9 years of alienation could not be obliterated in a single night. But for the first time since that telephone conversation while playing video games with companions, I possessed optimism that recovery was achievable. The familial assembly was planned for that evening at grandmother's home. I reached to discover vehicles already occupying the driveway. Through the pane, I could observe relatives assembled in the living room, their expressions strained. Eve's automobile had not yet arrived. Within, the ambience was heavy with expectation. My aunts and uncles were seated in the identical positions they had taken 9 years prior when they had initially heard Eve's charge. The paradox was not lost on me. Amy pressed my shoulder as I sat down. 20 minutes later, Eve appeared with her parents. She appeared dreadful. Hair unkempt, garments creased, shadows beneath her eyes. Her assured exterior had utterly collapsed. She attempted to occupy her customary place, but grandmother indicated a chair in the room's core. Eve's countenance reddened as she apprehended she would be confronting all. I offered the chronology systematically, every falsehood recorded, every trend unveiled. Relatives circulated Bella's diary, Tom's sworn declaration, Rachel's image captures. Eve's parents' complexions paled with each item of proof. Her mother's hands trembled as she perused her daughter's own words concerning ruining those who defied her. Eve's efforts to interject were instantly quashed when she tried to claim the evidence was manufactured. Tom presented the audio of her admission. Her voice permeated the space, confessing all, devising fresh deceptions. Several family members gasped. An aunt exited the chamber in tears. The critical moment arrived when grandmother spoke. Her voice, typically gentle with age, resonated clearly and powerfully. She spoke of witnessing the family's self-destruction, about remaining mute when she had harbored uncertainties. She gazed straight at Eve and declared she had ruined something valuable with her falsehoods. Eve broke. She leaped up, shrieking that I was the preferred individual by all, that no one ever acknowledged her, that I merited my fate for disregarding her at familial occasions. The pretense did not merely falter. It disintegrated utterly. She confessed to contriving the falsehood because I had missed her birthday celebration while attending university. 9 years of ruination for an overlooked birthday. Aunt Linda abruptly rose, her countenance pale. She exited the chamber and reappeared minutes subsequent, bearing an antiquated journal with a botanical design. Her hands quivered as she turned the leaves. She had discovered it while preparing Eve's former room for refurbishment. The inscriptions were incriminating, elaborate schemes concerning making me atone for missing her birthday, for not affording her sufficient notice. A single entry, dated 2 weeks prior to the accusation, precisely delineated what she would allege I had done. Eve lunged for the journal, but her father restrained her arm. He took the journal and read it aloud, his voice faltering. The prior intention was irrefutable. Eve had penned about selecting me precisely because I was distant at university, about opting for sexual abuse because it would ensure my complete ostracism. She had even rehearsed what to communicate to her parents. The room burst into uproar. Relatives who had been suppressing their ire at last released it. They challenged Eve about other deceptions throughout the years, feigned ailments, baseless charges against educators, deceptive stratagems. The tendency extended back to early life. Eve's parents remained motionless, observing their daughter's lifelong deceit unfold. Grandmother rendered the verdict that would redefine our family. She stood, utilizing her walking stick for stability, and pronounced Eve unwelcomed at any familial assembly until she sought significant psychological assistance and offered sincere recompense to all she had wronged. The familial elder had decreed. No one defied her. Eve's reply was instantaneous and malicious. She retrieved her device and displayed an image to me, her hand grasping an aerosol can above my vehicle. She menaced that if I did not publicly pardon her and declare the images falsified, she would ensure all perceived me as perilous. I exited wordlessly. Several family members followed. In the parking area, we discovered my vehicle already defaced. Predator, inscribed in red spray paint across the bonnet. But Eve had committed a pivotal error. Grandmother's neighbor possessed a surveillance camera that monitored the parking area. We viewed the recording on his device, Eve defacing my car with spray paint mere minutes before entering the dwelling. The neighbor, a former law enforcement official, offered to lodge a formal complaint. But something else was transpiring. Eve's parents were escorting her to their vehicle. Her mother was conversing on the telephone, urgently discussing immediate psychological hospitalization. Her father gripped Eve's arm resolutely as she oscillated between weeping and yelling menaces. Re-entering. The family splintered once more. Some relatives feared we were driving Eve to a crisis point. My mother hesitated, wringing her hands and proposing we all simply proceed for tranquility. She continually reiterated that Eve remained a relative, that perhaps we could resolve this collectively. The disagreement divided the room. One half desired to aid Eve in seeking assistance while preserving connections. The other half, guided by Amy and Bella, demanded strict limitations. Tones escalated. Past grievances emerged. The identical forces that had enabled Eve's falsehood to ruin all were reappearing. I exited the dwelling and remained in my defaced vehicle for more than 60 minutes. Through the windscreen, I could observe my family disputing through grandmother's living room pane. 9 years prior, they had instantaneously unified against me. Now they could not concur on managing the reality. My device vibrated with messages from both factions, each attempting to draw me to their viewpoint. Marcus appeared, having obtained my geographical marker. He inspected the aerosol paint defacement and gestured negatively. We remained quietly while I grappled with the choice. I could press for extreme repercussions, file accusations, seek a protective injunction, guarantee Eve encountered legal consequences. Or I could endorse the psychological assistance her parents were organizing. The resolution became evident when Eve's father tapped on my car window. He appeared shattered, aged 10 years in a single night. He clarified they were transporting Eve for immediate psychological assessment. She had menaced self-injury before them, abrading her arms until blood emerged. They required familial backing for a mandatory confinement. I rendered my decision. I would endorse the psychological assistance, but with stringent stipulations. Eve would be required to confess the truth to all she had deceived. The family would uphold an agreement of no interaction. She would need to adhere to all therapeutic advisories. The limitations were unalterable. Eve's collapse intensified in the parking area. She broke free from her parents and sprinted towards the thoroughfare, shrieking that she preferred demise over confinement. Her father apprehended her before she reached vehicular flow. The tableau was disorder. Residents observing from pains. Eve struggling against her parents' hold. Her mother weeping while attempting to soothe her. An emergency vehicle appeared within moments. Eve's mother had telephoned during the dispute. The medical personnel advanced cautiously, speaking with placid voices. Eve vacillated between confessing all and refuting everything, asserting we had propelled her to this state, that the falsehoods were in fact veracious, that she was the true aggrieved party. The discrepancies in her declarations sufficiently troubled the medical personnel to advocate for transport for assessment. As they readied to depart, Eve executed a final deceptive maneuver. She informed the medical personnel I had been pursuing her, that this was entirely reprisal for my spurning. But with 12 familial observers and corroboration of her admission, her assertions failed. The medical personnel had witnessed sufficient psychological emergencies to identify the behaviors. The family reassembled at grandmother's home after Eve's departure. The previous disputes melted into weary quietude. We occupied the identical room where it had all commenced 9 years prior, digesting what had transpired. Grandmother interrupted the quiet by inquiring what I required from the family henceforth. I articulated my stipulations lucidly. Complete recognition of the wrongs inflicted upon me, aid for Eve in obtaining treatment, but with preserved limitations, no compulsion to pardon or amend relations until my readiness. The family would be required to re-establish faith through deeds, not rhetoric. Paramountly, no further concealments or deliberate disregard of troublesome conduct. 3 weeks subsequent, we convened once more at grandmother's home. Eve appeared with her parents and a counselor from the mental health institution. She had confined herself voluntarily after the initial detention. The counselor clarified Eve had been diagnosed with a profound personality ailment necessitating extensive long-term therapy. Eve occupied the identical central seat, but her disposition had altered. She seemed tranquilized, motions ponderous and intentional. When invited to speak to the family, she recited from a pre-written declaration. The phrasing was accurate, acknowledging the deceptions, accepting culpability, but conveyed without effect, robotically pre-practiced. The counselor disclosed Eve's behavioral trend was more profound than anyone had grasped. She had fabricated intricate, untrue stories throughout her existence, each intensifying when prior falsehoods proved effective. The charge against me had been her most ruinous deception, but by no means her sole one. Therapy would require years, with no assurance of complete remission. Family members posed inquiries. Eve's replies vacillated between accepting culpability and subtle endeavors to displace blame. She asserted psychological infirmity compelled her dishonesty, then conceded she had understood her actions precisely. She expressed regret, then implied we had all overreacted. The counselor recorded observations, periodically interjecting when Eve attempted to scheme. Grandmother delivered the final statement. Her statements pierced Eve's charade. She informed Eve directly that falsehoods bore repercussions, that psychological ailment did not absolve deliberate decisions to ruin existences. She reiterated the family's resolution. Eve would maintain no interaction with familial gatherings for a minimum of 5 years. Should she conclude therapy and offer sincere recompense, they could reevaluate. Eve's ultimate deceptive maneuver occurred, as anticipated. She gripped her abdomen, asserting intense discomfort, implying the strain might lead to self-injury if the family withheld absolution. The chamber's reaction was singular: seek aid, adhere to therapy, accept accountability. The era of psychological coercion had ended. The counselor accompanied Eve out while her parents completed documentation. She would revert to the institution for ongoing therapy. As she departed, she glanced back at me a single time. No contrition in her gaze, only frigid deliberation. Already contriving her subsequent action. Certain aspects remain unaltered. I remained in grandmother's garden subsequently with my siblings and relatives. We ignited a modest blaze in the antiquated fire pit. I retrieved the dossier of proof, image captures, printed materials, corroboration of 9 years of suffering. Individually, I consigned them to the conflagration, the remnants dispersed by the breeze, wafting towards the boundary separating Eve's childhood residence. My mother drew near as the final documents incinerated. She retrieved a photographic album from the dwelling, images from prior to the falsehood, familial assemblies, festive commemorations. My university commencement. 9 years of blank sheets succeeded. She presented me with a writing implement and a collection of current photographs. We commenced bridging the voids collaboratively. 6 months subsequently, I hosted Christmas supper at my home. The table was occupied. Parents, siblings, their offspring, relatives, aunts, uncles. Grandmother presided at the head, feebler, yet still astute. A vacant seat remained where Eve would have been seated, displaying an image of our family from prior to the deception, a testament to the price of falsehood and the restorative power of veracity. My romantic partner assisted with the meal service. She understood the entire narrative, had supported me through the concluding months of reconstruction. My nieces and nephews referred to me as uncle for the initial time. The term felt unfamiliar, yet appropriate. Marcus accompanied us, virtually a family member now. Tom dispatched a greeting card. He had discovered tranquility in a self-help group and commenced new relationships. The entrance bell chimed during the sweet course. All stiffened, but it was merely vocalists disseminating festive joy. We hearkened from the entrance. My family drew in tightly, not as it was previously. Marked, yet recovering, damaged, yet repairing. Certain elements cannot be reinstated. 9 years are irrecoverable.